David stood, frozen, as the judge announced his decision. Custody is awarded to the mother. His heart shattered as his 7-year-old daughter's eyes filled with tears. His ex-wife smiled triumphantly. Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open. Elizabeth Walker, CEO of a leading tech company, strode in with determination. "Your Honor, I have new evidence." She placed a USB drive on the bench. "This recording will change everything." David's eyes met Elizabeth's, the woman he had pushed out of his life. What could be on that mysterious recording? Will it save David from losing his daughter forever? Stay with us to discover how this emotional story unfolds. David Wilson had always been the kind of father who tried his best, even when his best didn't seem enough. At 35, he worked as an IT engineer at a small software company, earning just enough to keep a roof over their heads, a modest one-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood of Boston. The walls were thin, the furniture second-hand, but he'd managed to make it home for his daughter Lily. Every evening, no matter how exhausted he felt, David would rush home to cook dinner, often simple meals of pasta or sandwiches, and read bedtime stories to Lily. His phone was perpetually set to silent during those precious evening hours. Nothing was more important than seeing his daughter's smile as he tucked her in, even if it meant logging back into work after she fell asleep. Life hadn't always been this hard. 3 years ago, he had a partner, a larger apartment, and dreams of buying a house with a yard where Lily could play. But then Jessica, his wife and Lily's mother, had announced one day that family life was suffocating her dreams. She wanted to pursue a modeling career, and neither David nor their daughter fit into that glamorous future. The divorce papers arrived a week later, and Jessica disappeared from their lives, leaving only sporadic birthday texts and broken promises to visit. The abandonment had broken something in David. He'd built walls around his heart, focusing entirely on being both mother and father to Lily, working overtime to afford her medications, and keeping his emotions carefully contained. He couldn't risk being hurt again. Lily was 7 now, a bright-eyed, perceptive child with chestnut hair that curled like her mother's and her father's thoughtful brown eyes. Despite her young age, she understood more than David wished she did. She helped fold laundry without being asked, remembered to take her asthma medication most days, and never complained when dinner was the same 3 nights in a row. She was growing up too fast, shouldering worries no child should carry. Her asthma had been diagnosed when she was just 3, and the condition frequently sent them rushing to the emergency room in the middle of the night. Each hospital visit drained their meager savings, but David would have sold everything he owned to see her breathe easily again. The medical bills kept piling up, and the collection notices arrived with alarming frequency. At night, after Lily was asleep, David would sometimes find her drawings tucked under her pillow, pictures of a family with 3 stick figures, a tall man labeled Dad, a small girl with a big smile, and a woman with a crown who was sometimes labeled Mom and sometimes New Mom. These drawings broke his heart. No matter how much love he poured into raising her alone, he couldn't fill the mother-shaped hole in her life. Elizabeth Walker's life couldn't have looked more different from the outside. At 32, she was the youngest female CEO in Boston's competitive biotech sector. Her company, Meditech, had revolutionized healthcare monitoring technology, earning her features in business magazines and speaking slots at prestigious conferences. She lived in a sleek downtown penthouse, wore designer clothes, and moved through the world with the confidence of someone who had conquered it. But behind closed doors, Elizabeth's life was hollow. Born to brilliant scientists, she had inherited their analytical minds and drive, graduating top of her class from MIT before earning her MBA from Harvard. What she hadn't inherited was their happy marriage. Her own had ended 5 years ago when her husband decided her inability to have children after a car accident was a deal breaker. "I want my own children," he had said while packing his things. As if she had chosen this path. As if her infertility was a personal failure rather than a tragedy they both suffered. The accident had done more than take her ability to bear children. It had awakened memories of her childhood, of watching her mother struggle to breathe during asthma attacks, of the night they couldn't get to the hospital in time. Elizabeth had channeled that pain into purpose, creating a foundation dedicated to asthma research and support for affected families. It gave meaning to her success, but didn't fill the emptiness in her home. Their paths crossed on a rainy Tuesday evening at Boston Children's Hospital. Elizabeth was there to demonstrate Meditech's newest pediatric asthma monitor. David was there because Lily had suffered a severe attack at school, leaving him panic-stricken and sleep-deprived after 36 hours by her bedside. Elizabeth first noticed him slumped in an uncomfortable chair, his hand holding his daughter's even in sleep. The child's oxygen monitor beeped softly, her small chest rising and falling with each assisted breath. Something about the sight, the father's devotion, the child's vulnerability, stopped Elizabeth in her tracks. As she lingered outside the room, she overheard David's conversation with the billing department. The desperate tone in his voice, as he asked about payment plans, reminded her of her own father after her mother's death. The same mix of fear and determination. When the hospital administrator walked away shaking her head, Elizabeth saw the defeat wash over David's face. She was about to continue down the hall when the little girl suddenly began wheezing, her monitors alarming. David jolted awake, fumbling for the call button. Elizabeth acted on instinct, rushing in to help position the child while the nurses came running. Her years of living with her mother's condition had taught her exactly what to do in those critical moments. As the crisis passed and Lily's breathing stabilized, David looked at Elizabeth with grateful confusion. "Who are you?" he asked, still holding his daughter's hand. "Just someone who understands asthma," she replied, introducing herself simply as Elizabeth without mentioning her company or position. Something told her that this man wouldn't respond well to charity from a CEO. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the image of father and daughter, alone against a world of medical bills and midnight emergencies. That night, Elizabeth made a decision that would change all their lives. She asked her assistant to arrange for the hospital bill to be covered anonymously through her foundation's emergency family support program. She also ordered one of Meditech's prototype asthma monitors to be sent to the Wilsons' home as part of a research study with a generous participant stipend. She told herself it was just good corporate social responsibility, identifying a family who could benefit from their technology while providing valuable user feedback. But she knew there was more to it. Something about David's fierce independence and Lily's brave smile had touched a place in her heart she thought had scarred over years ago. A week later, Elizabeth orchestrated a coincidental meeting at Lily's school, where she appeared as a representative of her foundation announcing a new science program sponsorship. When Lily spotted her and ran over with an excited, "It's the asthma angel from the hospital, Daddy!" The surprise on David's face was matched only by his immediate wariness. "Thank you for your help that day," he said carefully after the presentation, keeping a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "But we're managing fine now." Elizabeth recognized the pride in his stance. "I'm sure you are," she said. "But every child deserves access to good science education, don't you think? Lily was telling me she loves experiments." The girl nodded enthusiastically. "I want to be a doctor or a scientist when I grow up. I want to fix people's breathing like mine." David's expression softened, looking at his daughter's excitement. "Well, maybe we could hear more about this program." That conversation was the first of many. Elizabeth began visiting once a week, bringing science books and simple experiment kits for Lily. She was careful to frame everything as part of the foundation's work, never as personal charity. Each visit, David's guard lowered slightly. He couldn't deny the joy these visits brought to Lily, whose asthma attacks had become less frequent since using the monitoring device. One rainy Saturday, Elizabeth invited them to tour Meditech's labs as part of a Take Your Child to Work event. Watching Lily's eyes widen at the gleaming equipment and attentive scientists, David felt a confusing mix of gratitude and inadequacy. He could never provide these opportunities on his own. "She's a natural," Elizabeth said, watching Lily carefully follow a simple experiment demonstrated by one of the researchers. "She asks exactly the right questions." "She's always been curious," David replied with quiet pride. "Even as a toddler, she wanted to know how everything worked." "Like her father?" Elizabeth asked with a smile. David looked surprised. "I suppose so. I was always taking apart computers as a kid. And now you build software." the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Something warm and unfamiliar stirred in David's chest at her words. The simple acknowledgement that he had passed something positive to his daughter, not just the struggle of their daily lives. Their dynamics shifted one night when David caught a severe flu. Barely able to stand but determined not to miss work, he was attempting to make Lily's breakfast when Elizabeth arrived for their scheduled science lesson. One look at his feverish face and she took charge, sending him back to bed despite his protests. "You can't take care of Lily if you don't take care of yourself," she insisted, already calling his workplace to explain his absence. "I'll stay with her today." Through his fever haze, David heard laughter from the kitchen. Lily's high-pitched giggles and Elizabeth's warm chuckle as they apparently made a mess cooking something. He should get up, should not be relying on this woman who already did too much for them. But his body betrayed him, pulling him back into feverish sleep. He awoke hours later to find Lily sitting beside his bed, carefully holding a bowl of tomato soup. "We made it together," she announced proudly. "Lizzie showed me how to crush the tomatoes and add the special spices." Behind her, Elizabeth leaned against the doorframe, an unfamiliar domestic scene that made David's heart constrict. Later that night, after putting Lily to bed, he found Elizabeth asleep on their worn couch, a children's science book fallen open on her chest. Her usual polished CEO appearance softened in slumber. For the first time in years, David allowed himself to imagine a different future, one where he wasn't carrying the weight of parenthood alone. The thought terrified him. As winter turned to spring, Elizabeth became a fixture in their lives. She kept her apartment downtown but spent more evenings in their small living room, helping Lily with homework or discussing coding problems with David. The boundaries between professional support and personal involvement blurred as Lily began asking when Lizzie would visit next, saving drawings for her, calling her first when she got a good grade. One evening, as they sat on the apartment's tiny balcony after Lily was asleep, David finally asked the question that had been haunting him. "Why us, Elizabeth? With all the families your foundation could help, why have you spent so much time with Lily and me?" Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights. "My mother died from an asthma attack when I was 9. We couldn't get to the hospital in time." She rarely shared this story, but David deserved the truth. "When I saw you and Lily in that hospital room, I saw my father. The same desperate determination to protect his child from something he couldn't control." She turned to face him. "But it's become more than that. Being with you and Lily, it feels like the family I thought I'd never have." The vulnerability in her eyes made David reach for her hand. Neither spoke about the moment afterward, but something fundamental had changed between them. Their tentative happiness shattered 3 months into their friendship. David was sorting through mail when he found a hospital statement marked "paid in full." Confused, he called the billing department, only to discover that all of Lily's medical expenses had been covered by the Walker Foundation for Children's Health. His stomach clenched as he connected the dots. The research study payments that had kept them afloat. The scholarship opportunity Elizabeth had mentioned for a prestigious private school. The sudden absence of collection calls. It had all been her. Not foundation programs, but personal charity. Humiliation and betrayal burned through him. He'd been opening their lives, their hearts, to someone who saw them as a project, a way to replace the family she couldn't have. He'd let down his guard, believing they were building something real, when all along, she'd been buying her way into their lives. David confronted Elizabeth at her office the next day, his voice tight with anger as he interrupted a meeting. "Were you ever going to tell me, or was watching me struggle part of the entertainment?" Elizabeth's face paled as she quickly ushered him into a private room. "David, please let me explain." "Explain what? How you lied about every program and study to make me feel like we weren't accepting handouts? How you've been playing house with my daughter while keeping me in the dark?" "That's not fair," Elizabeth protested, her own anger rising. "I was trying to help without hurting your pride." "My pride?" David's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you think this is about?" "This is about trust, Elizabeth. This is about you deciding you know what's best for my family, without even giving me the dignity of a choice. I didn't want to risk you saying no because you're too stubborn to accept help." Her composure cracked. "Lily deserves every opportunity, every advantage." Don't you dare use my daughter to justify lying to me for months." His voice dropped dangerously low. "We are not your charity case. We are not a replacement for the family you can't have." The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd gone too far. The hurt that flashed across Elizabeth's face made him want to take it back immediately, but his pride wouldn't let him. "I see," she said finally, her CEO mask sliding firmly back into place. "I apologize for overstepping. I'll have all the paperwork for Lily's school and medical assistance sent to you. You can decide what to do with it." "We don't need anything from you," David said, turning to leave. "Don't contact us again." He walked out, ignoring the voice in his head screaming that he was making a terrible mistake. The following weeks were miserable. Lily couldn't understand why Elizabeth had disappeared from their lives and asked for her constantly. "Did Lizzie stop loving us?" she asked one night, her small voice breaking David's heart all over again. "Sometimes adults have complicated feelings," was all he could manage to say. A thick envelope arrived containing all the paperwork for Lily's school scholarship and medical assistance programs, along with 2 letters, one for David, which he left unopened, and one for Lily, which he reluctantly gave her after checking its contents. It simply said that Elizabeth would always care about her, even if they couldn't see each other for a while. As his anger faded, doubt crept in. Had he overreacted? Elizabeth had crossed boundaries, but her intentions had been good. He missed her presence in their small apartment, the way she could make Lily laugh even during her worst days, the quiet conversations after Lily was asleep. But his pride kept him from reaching out, from admitting he might have been wrong. Then disaster struck. Jessica suddenly reappeared after 3 years of near-total absence, with a lawyer and demands for custody of Lily. "I've established myself now," she told David coldly. "I can provide her with opportunities you never could. The courts will see that." David was blindsided. Jessica had barely asked about Lily in years, sending occasional gifts but missing birthdays and school events. Now she claimed motherly concern? The truth emerged when he discovered she'd been cast in a reality TV show about model mothers balancing career and family life, and needed her daughter as a prop. But Jessica had advantages David couldn't match. A luxurious apartment, financial stability, and expensive lawyers who painted David as a struggling father unable to provide adequate care for a child with chronic health issues. They pointed to Lily's hospital visits, the small apartment, the lack of prestigious schooling. If Mr. Wilson cannot even afford proper medical care for his asthmatic daughter without charity, her lawyer argued in the preliminary hearing, how can he claim to provide a stable environment? David tried to fight back with the only weapon he had, the truth of his unwavering presence in Lily's life. But the legal system seemed stacked against single fathers of modest means. The judge ordered a full custody evaluation, and David felt his world collapsing. The stress took its toll on Lily, who suffered her worst asthma attack in months. As David sat by her hospital bed, he finally opened Elizabeth's letter. Inside, she hadn't justified her actions or asked for forgiveness. She'd simply written, "Whatever you decide about me, please don't let pride stand in the way of Lily's future. She deserves every chance, not because I think you're inadequate, but because I believe in you." Tears blurred his vision as he realized what he'd thrown away. Not just support, but someone who truly cared about them both. In his darkest moment, alone in that hospital room, David whispered words he never thought he'd say. "I was wrong, Elizabeth. We need you." The custody hearing arrived with brutal speed. David had scraped together enough for a mediocre lawyer, but faced Jessica's team of legal sharks alone. He'd accepted the school scholarship for Lily, hoping it would strengthen his case, but Jessica's lawyers painted it as evidence of his dependence on charity. The proceedings went exactly as he feared. Jessica presented herself as a reformed mother, ready to provide stability and privilege. Her lawyers systematically dismantled David's parenting, highlighting every financial struggle and medical emergency. "Your Honor," David said when finally allowed to speak, "I may not be wealthy or perfect, but I've been there for every fever, every nightmare, every lost tooth and school project. I've never once chosen my needs over my daughter's." The judge's expression remained impassive. Mr. Wilson, intention and love are important, but children need stability and resources. The court must consider what environment best serves the child's interests. David's heart plummeted as he realized he was about to lose everything that mattered. Your Honor, the judge continued, unless there's additional evidence to consider, I'm prepared to make my ruling. That's when the courtroom doors burst open. Elizabeth Walker strode in, flanked by a team of attorneys carrying folders of documents. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I have evidence critical to this case. Jessica's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Ms. Walker has no standing in this custody matter. I have standing as a witness to Ms. Reynolds' true intentions, Elizabeth countered firmly, approaching the bench with a USB drive. This contains a recorded conversation between Jessica Reynolds and producer Tyler Martin discussing the real reason for this custody petition. The judge's eyebrows rose as he signaled for the court officer to play the recording. Jessica's voice filled the courtroom. I don't really want to be saddled with a kid full-time. Once we get the custody ruling and film the tearful reunion episodes, she can stay with a nanny. I just need her for the Mother of the Year story arc. The network says it'll boost ratings by 30%. Jessica's face drained of color as her own words condemned her. But Elizabeth wasn't finished. She presented medical reports documenting Lily's improved health under David's care, letters from teachers praising his involvement, and testimony from asthma specialists about the excellent home management of Lily's condition. Furthermore, Elizabeth continued, Mr. Wilson has secured a full scholarship to Westfield Academy based entirely on Lily's academic promise and not financial need. She scored in the 98th percentile on their entrance examination. The judge studied Elizabeth with interest. Ms. Walker, what is your relationship to this family? Elizabeth straightened her shoulders. I met them when my company was testing pediatric medical devices. But my interest isn't professional, Your Honor. I'm here because I care deeply about Lily and her father. She turned to face David, her professional mask slipping. I didn't help them out of pity. I helped because I found a family I never thought I could have. Her voice caught on the last words, and David felt his own eyes burning with unshed tears. I have one last piece of evidence, Elizabeth said, signaling to one of her attorneys who opened the courtroom door. Lily walked in, holding a nurse's hand, her small face determined despite the oxygen tube in her nose. She had been in the hospital recovering from her last attack, but insisted on coming when she heard about the hearing. Daddy, she cried, running straight to David, who knelt to embrace her. Ms. Walker brought me, Lily explained breathlessly. She said you needed me to tell the truth. The judge smiled for the first time that day. And what truth is that, young lady? Lily turned to face the bench, her hand firmly in David's. My daddy is the best daddy in the world. He reads to me every night, even when he's super tired. He never forgets my medicine. He makes pancakes shaped like dinosaurs when I'm sad. She took a breath from her inhaler before continuing. And Ms. Lizzie helps us too. She teaches me science and stays when I'm sick. They both love me more than anything. She looked at her mother with confusion rather than anger. Mommy only calls on my birthday, sometimes. She forgot what grade I'm in. The simplicity and clarity of a child's perspective silenced the courtroom. Jessica couldn't meet her daughter's eyes. Your Honor, Elizabeth said quietly, I don't know what your ruling will be, but I want to state for the record that I've established a trust for Lily's education and medical care, regardless of the outcome today. This isn't charity, it's an investment in a brilliant young mind, and it comes with no strings attached. The judge considered all the evidence before speaking. Ms. Reynolds, did you record this conversation with knowledge it was being recorded? Jessica's lawyer whispered urgently to her before she answered. Yes, Your Honor, but I was just saying what the producers wanted to hear. I do want to be part of my daughter's life. Perhaps that's true, the judge replied. But custody is not a part-time commitment for when it's convenient or professionally advantageous. He turned to David. Mr. Wilson, this court finds that you have provided exemplary care under difficult circumstances. Sole legal and physical custody will remain with you. David pulled Lily close, unable to speak through his emotions. Ms. Reynolds will have supervised visitation to be determined, the judge continued. And Ms. Walker, While your intervention was unconventional, this court appreciates your advocacy for the child's best interests." As the courtroom cleared, David finally approached Elizabeth, who stood uncertainly by the door. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for today, but for everything I was too proud to accept." Elizabeth's composure finally broke. "I'm sorry for not being honest with you. I should have respected you enough to tell you the truth from the beginning. And I should have understood that accepting help doesn't make me less of a father." He took her hand hesitantly. "I've missed you. We both have." Lily tugged at Elizabeth's blazer. "Does this mean you're coming home with us, Lizzie? Are you staying this time?" Elizabeth knelt to Lily's level. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" "Yes. Daddy needs someone to make him smile. And I need someone who knows about science and breathing." Over Lily's head, David and Elizabeth's eyes met in a silent question and answer. "We have a lot to figure out," David said softly, "but I think we could start by having dinner together tonight." Elizabeth smiled through her tears. "I'd like that very much." 1 year later, the small apartment had been replaced by a modest house with a backyard garden where Lily could play without triggering her asthma. David still worked at his software company, but had taken on additional work developing applications for Meditech's pediatric devices. Lily thrived at her new school, her health steadily improving, with consistent care and reduced stress. Elizabeth had kept her downtown apartment but spent most nights at what neighbors now called the Wilson Walker house. Her toothbrush had a permanent spot in the bathroom, her business suits gradually migrating to the closet in the spare bedroom. That wasn't quite her room, but wasn't really a guest room either. They moved cautiously, both aware of the complex emotions involved in building a blended family. Elizabeth attended parenting classes, learning to balance her natural problem-solving approach with the understanding that not everything needed to be fixed. David worked with a therapist to address his abandonment fears and pride that had nearly cost him everything. Sunday breakfast became their sacred ritual. Pancakes for Lily, strong coffee for the adults, and no phones or interruptions. These quiet mornings felt more like family than any official document could convey. In Lily's room, a wall of photos documented their evolving relationship. Elizabeth teaching Lily to ride a bike, David and Elizabeth cheering at Lily's science fair, all three bundled up on a winter sledding trip. A single photo of Jessica remained because Elizabeth had insisted that erasing Lily's birth mother would only create confusion later. "Everyone's story matters," she'd explained to David, "even the complicated parts." Jessica had called several times since the hearing, her reality show canceled after the courtroom revelations. She seemed genuinely interested in establishing some relationship with Lily, though David remained cautious, arranging supervised visits that Elizabeth tactfully avoided to give mother and daughter space to reconnect on their own terms. As for David and Elizabeth, they existed in an undefined space, more than friends, not quite traditional partners. Elizabeth still wore the simple silver pendant David had given her for Christmas instead of her usual designer jewelry. David kept a small jewelry box hidden in his sock drawer, unopened, waiting for the right moment. One warm evening in June, they sat on the porch swing, watching Lily tend to her science project, a butterfly garden she'd planted with Elizabeth's guidance. The domestic peace of the moment struck David suddenly. How far they'd come from that desperate hospital room where they'd first met. "Do you think we should make things official?" he asked quietly, his hand finding hers on the swing between them. Elizabeth's smile was gentle. "We're already a family. Papers are just details." Before he could respond, Lily came running up the porch steps, dirt on her knees and excitement in her eyes. "I drew something new," she announced, thrusting a paper at them both. "It's us. Dad, Mom, Lizzie, and," she pointed to a small figure in the drawing, "a baby brother or sister." David and Elizabeth exchanged startled looks, a conversation of possibilities passing silently between them. "Honey," Elizabeth began carefully, "you know that's complicated for me." "I know you can't grow babies," Lily said with the matter-of-fact acceptance of children, "but my friend Zoe has 2 moms who adopted her from another country. We could do that too, right?" Elizabeth's hand tightened around David's, her eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "Maybe someday," David answered for them both, pulling Lily into a hug that included Elizabeth. "For now, Let's enjoy the family we have. As twilight deepened around their little house, a gentle peace settled over the three of them. Not a perfect family by conventional standards, but something perhaps more precious because they had chosen each other, fought for each other, and built something neither biology nor legal documents could fully define. Sometimes the most beautiful families aren't the ones we're born into, but the ones we find along life's journey and choose to stay with, day after day. If you are moved by this healing journey, please like this video, share this story, and subscribe to our channel to restore your faith in humanity and family bonds. Do you think David and Elizabeth should move toward marriage, or have they already created a perfect family in their own unique way?